We're excited to have another great NAB this year. We have a number of different products that are going to be fan favorites, we believe. And so we'll get into those today, as well as some basic overview. So our booth is located this year in the South Lower Hall. We were in the South Lower Hall last year, but we're a little bit further into the hall, down the stairwell. If you go on the main aisle, we're just to the left as you get about a quarter of the way through the hall. On this big blue circle is where our booth is highlighted. It's a 40 by 40 size booth, and we'll be showcasing all the technology that we're talking about today will be on our booth. So please bring customers by and grab one of your sales managers. We're happy to talk to you about what we're doing and what's going on. So a brief update of or an overview of our product lines, just to make sure everybody is aware. Our primary product line is the openGear card-based modular format that goes into a standard chassis with a standard control interface called dashboard that monitors and controls all the cards or other vendors' cards as well in the openGear platform. We also have a standalone unit called a BBG 1000 that's basically a single card enclosure that in an openGear format, but it's specifically for that solution. It's not a serviceable, front serviceable frame that you can interchange cards. It's a purpose-built for a single openGear card. And then we also have the blue box group throwdown converters. So these are our little mini converters that are the introductory prices to our product line. And then we also have some transport stream level products or compressed products called Elements and Spot Check. Elements is a loudness management for n number of transport streams. So you can do automatic level control for a transport stream. And then Spot Check is a broadcast compliance logger that'll look at ASI or HVSB or IP transport streams and measure for loudness or look at closed captions, loss of video, loss of audio, things of that nature. So we do have a wide range of the standalone blue box group, anything from analog to digital to embedders, disembedders, a number of different fiber units. They're manufactured in the USA, backed by a 5-year warranty. And we've been manufacturing these for over 20 years. Cobalt started on these types of boxes, and we still support them today. And then we have the openGear, and this is just to give you an overview of the breadth of the product line that we have. We're not going to dig into this slide today, but you can go to our website and go to any one of these categories and find information. Anything from advanced audio processing to distribution, Multiview, which we'll touch about today a little bit, and compression. The openGear is a standard frame for about 20 or so different manufacturers. Power supplies are available on either side that are hot swappable, and then the rear modules are customizable on the back of the frame. So to give you an idea of the ordering information, we have two frames actually. There's the openGear OGX frame, and then there's the Cobalt HPF 9000. The HPF 9000 is similar to the openGear frame, but there's a few small differences. There's 360 watts of usable power in the HPF 9000 and 460 watts of usable power in the OGX frame. And then in addition, there's a distributed Ethernet bus in the OGX frame that allows for control of cards outside of the dashboard control interface. We have, when you order a frame, you get a frame and a power supply. You have to order a second redundant power supply. There's a network card that's included in the HPF. The OGX has a few different levels of networking cards, depending on your situation. And then there's rear support brackets for both frames. The BBG 1000 series, as I said, is a standalone unit that fits into this metal tray. You can fit 3 of them in a 1RU space. And we have specific cards that are listed here, and there might be a few others on our website that you can find that deal with certain functions across our product lines. They have DC dual redundant power in the back, and they have a touch or a display on the front, not touch display, but you can get through the menus and control the parameters on the card either in dashboard or from the front display. So getting into now the new cards that we have showcased here at NAB, we're going to be shortly after show launching our 9971 Multiviewer line. This card here that's being highlighted is the 18 input 4K solution. And by 4K, we don't just mean the output. So we definitely have 12 gig SDI outs as well as HDMI 2.0 outputs. So you can feed a router or a consumer level monitor. But we also have 12 gig SDI inputs available on all 18 inputs. So you can natively feed and monitor your 4K signals in SDI, 12 gig SDI with this multi-view solution. They can also be run in cascade mode so that you can actually put together two cards within a frame to take in 34 inputs and then output two unique outputs for two different control stations. We can also have a unique mode in our 18 input card where we output 4 quad splits where you can run any one of the inputs to any one of those quad split outputs. So it's a very cost-effective way to do quad split monitoring. These cards will have the ability to do overlays, tallies, UMDs, audio metering for VU metering. And then you can customize the layouts to mix and match. You don't just have to have a grid layout. You can actually have the pips in any kind of aspect ratio or positioning on the monitor. So there are several different variants. Besides just the 18 input, we also have 6 input, and then we have a 6 SDI input with another 4 HDMI for a total of 10 input sources as for a mixed mode multi-viewer, input multi-viewer. And as you can see, some of the functions that we spoke about earlier are available on this block diagram, which is also available on the website. But it's a very customizable, flexible multi-view solution for really whatever needs you have in your facility. We also have an OTT story for delivering up to 4K, although if you have center definition, high definition, 2K video, we can deliver all that as well to the cloud through any one of your content distribution networks or CDNs, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Verizon, some other provider. We can send. We can also do HLS streaming out of our cards directly to a web browser. So we have a lot of functionality within our cards here for providing video over the internet. It's a rich protocol, and if you use the 9992 ENC 4K HEVC, you can actually take 4K content, probably about 40 megabits per second in terms of the bandwidth size, to the internet, fairly easily. So to give you an idea of the licensing, a little bit more in depth on this card. So the base unit, the 9992-ENC, provides one AVC license or MPEG-4 license, along with 2 audio licenses. And each audio license is capable of 2 channels, so that's a total of 4 channels of audio. If you can option that board up for more channels, you can either add an HEVC license, so that AVC or HEVC compatible board, or you can add additional channels up to 4 channels. And then once you have all 4 channels of the AVC and the 4 channels of the HEVC added, you can also add our 4K license so that you can output either 4K, 1 channel of 4K, or 4 channels of 2K. And we also have a top level ordering a line item, which is the 9992-ENC 4K HEVC. So this is really great for either using high density AVC or MPEG-4 solution, or high density HEVC or MPEG-5 encoding solution. And each one of these channels is going to be capable of up to 16 channels of audio support. So whether you use the MPEG-1 layer 2 audio or the AAC audio, we can also license Dolby encoding 5.1 and stereo. So this becomes not just a stereo, but a surround sound encoding platform. We also have some per unit licenses that will apply to any one of the channels. We can turn this into a 422 encoder for sports or high motion graphics. We also have the ability to add on forward air correction, or we can also use RIST, which we'll talk about a little bit. So in terms of the operation of this card, we can, like we said before, we can set it to either a multi-channel up to 3G or 2K, or a single channel 4K. You also have to select the compression standard, whether that be HEVC, AVC, or even MPEG-2. And then eventually, down the line, we'll also pair this with a decoder, which will allow you to encode in some ultra-low latency or low latency modes. And we'll get into that more at a later time. For the video encode setup, you select the encoder. You actually have the ability to select from any one of the 4 input channels to this card to any one of the 4 encoder cards if it's licensed up to 4 encoders. You can select either what the bit is natively, either 8-bit or 10-bit. And then if you have the 422 option, you can select 422. Otherwise, it'll be 420. And then you can also select the bit rate and the number of audio channels. So up to 16. As you add audio channels in the card, you'll dynamically add these audio tabs. Right now, I have this card licensed for the MPEG-1 layer 2 or AAC. And so you see the basic controls here for the MPEG-1 layer 2. You can select the audio channels from either group or any group and either one of those 2 channels within the group for this encode. You can also set the audio bit rate. In this card, you can do some advanced encoder settings, like setting the GOP and when you're closing the GOP. So it's you really have a lot of control over the structure of the encode. As I promised before, we'll get a little bit more into the reliable internet streaming or transport, or RIST. This is a very exciting partnership between multiple manufacturers getting together to provide one interoperable, I'll use the word standard here, between the various manufacturers to send video over the internet to multiple locations. And we've had a lot of really great early feedback. This has really just been an initiative in the last year. And this past week, we had an interop at VidTrans, which is the VSF, the working group where this protocol was first created. We had a lot of really great interoperability tests between multiple manufacturers, large players like Haivision and with SRT, and also Zixi and VideoFlow and obviously Cobalt. Kind of getting down to how RIST works a little bit, and this is really how ARQ works, is the encoder sends out the packets that has some buffer that stores the packets. And then if the decoder doesn't get a packet, it'll be able to send a request to the encoder to resend that packet. And then it can repeat that process however many times. So in this situation, you'll have a delay that's twice the network delay times however many round trips that you require in terms of retrieving packets. And so if you have a latency of 25 milliseconds over your network, your end-to-end latency will be about 50 milliseconds. So compared to forward air correction, where you have to send a lot more overhead, which doesn't really work that well in an unmanaged network, RIST is a really simple, easy way to send packets reliably in an unmanaged network with the lowest latency possible. So in our encoder, and this is true for both our 2K and 4K encoders, and you can simply select RIST as a protocol. And once you select RIST as a protocol, you can set the NAC window, and that's the request window that we had in the earlier slide. And on our encoder cards, the 9223, which is our 2K encoder, you can have up to 4 streams of UDP transport to 4 different destinations. So we give you a lot of flexibility. When you enable RIST on our encoders are generally both IP and ASI. When you're transmitting in RIST, the ASI ports are no longer available because it's a non-standard ASI. So in the decoder setting, we do have the ability again to select RIST or as an input to the decoder. So you can set your NAC window in the decoder to determine how long you'll have to send back those requests for, which relates back to the size of the buffer in the decoder, which will contribute to your overall latency. And then we also give you a couple of different parameters here to look to see how well your packets are performing. So if you can see in the middle of this list, we have retransmission packets received and packets lost. So in this particular example, we had 2,300 packets that were lost, and then we retransmitted those 2,300 packets. And then down below, you can see that we recovered all packets. Unrecovered packets is 0, so we recovered all the lost packets. So you can get some very good performance metrics out of RIST when you add it to whatever encoding decoding solution that you're using. So another solution that we're really excited about is HDR. If you ask high-level production folks, HDR is one of the technologies that's really transforming the way people are looking to capture video in sporting events and entertainment. So, and the reason for that is it gives you a great picture for the number of bits that you have to transmit with the video signal. So Cobalt has been on the leading edge of HDR and SDR to HDR conversion, because while HDR is something that a lot of people are starting to request, SDR or standard dynamic range isn't going away anytime soon. And so you have to be able to produce content for both HDR and SDR for the foreseeable future. So Cobalt's 9904 UDX 4K card is able to take in SDR content from either a camera or an archive source and create an HDR signal so that you can have capture an HDR for the most part, and then any legacy equipment come in can be converted to HDR to go into your switcher, so you don't have to work with both HDR and SDR sources throughout the facility. So what that allows you to do is to basically have a single path production for both HDR and SDR productions. So then you can also feed with our what we call our plus SL-HDR 4K license on our 9904, an SDR, either you might have a truck or some other kind of legacy equipment. So we can come in and out of the switcher or router with SDR and HDR. And the license that we're using here, the ITM, stands for Intelligent Tone Mapping, and it will automatically convert the color space from one to another while paying attention to things like bright spot analysis, or if you have a large white or light area in your picture and you're trying to tone that down, the bright spots around that large image aren't lost. So it does have some intelligence in how it kind of changes the picture for that. And one of the other really neat things about what we're using for HDR and SDR is that there is a path transmission for this to the home viewer. So eventually, with ATSC 3.0, we can actually do a down convert using the SL-HDR process and include metadata so that we're only transmitting SDR to the consumer, but the downstream devices, televisions or set-top boxes, are actually able to pick up that SDR with the metadata and convert it back into HDR using that metadata depending on the device and what its capabilities are. So to give you an idea of what the controls look like for this is the ITM or the SDR to HDR converter, the intelligent tone mapping. We're able to select the input color space, and then there's certain modes within HDR. They're PQ, HLG, and S-Log3 are the top main three, and we can handle any one of those modes. And then we can also set the illuminance, or what's called the nit value. So once we do that, we have three different modes. We have a preset mode that allows you to basically use these histograms of color imagery that Technicolor has created in order to set different tones, either from the brightness or the contrast. So we have about 28 different values that you can select between customizing the brightness and the contrast, depending on your look. We can also do the next mode is this manual mode. And in the manual mode, you can really dial in the highlights, the midtones, the shadows, kind of be able to create the exact look and feel of the content for your specific event. So if you have somebody that's a golden eye or really a colorist, they can have complete control over all these different abilities. And then we also have an automatic mode, and the automatic mode is really a set and forget type of mode, which most people would probably use with some adjustments. But then once you make these adjustments, you really don't have to keep coming back and messing with the card. And then we also have an HDR to SDR, which is the SL-HDR option. And with that, we have a few different options. You can have it in bypass, obviously, or once you select the HDR to SDR tone mapping, that basically provides, again, we can use the PQ, HLG, or S-Log3 formats for the input, and then select the luminance, and then that'll automatically transmit that to the SDR color space. The other option is just the SL-HDR, which has some slight differences from the tone mapping. So this one provides metadata in addition to the SDR to HDR tone mapping that you can use to reinvigorate a signal back up to HDR if it has the required technology downstream. And then lastly, we have this HDR OETF convert to actually do HDR to HDR. So if you wanted to select that, you'd get another set of selections that would ask you what your output format was. So you can actually select your input settings if it's PQ, HLG, or S-Log3, and then you can have a different output on the other side. And you are able to, in all these modes, customize a little bit more. So if you wanted to zero in on a specific area, maybe you have a lower third or some kind of black bordering on your image, you can just look at a specific area to customize the SDR to HDR conversion, or HDR to SDR conversion. And then we also allow you to tune a little bit more with the lift, the gain, saturation, and a few different cuts. Kind of think about this similar to in the 709 space when you would have color legalization. So we give you some ability to control that curve as you go down from the HDR color space to the SDR color space. So we also have a new distribution amplifier coming out that's capable of handling 4K signals. It can be used for 4K or HD signals. It has the ability to have up to 4 inputs and 16 outputs. We have a similar type card right now in our 9910 DA. This one will provide better performance, and then also if you have 4K signals, it'll reclock 4K signals. Right now we're getting tests of about 80 meters out of our DA, which is pretty significant for 4K. That's enough to move inside most localized rack rooms. And then we also have the ability to take fiber in the top line board out of the unit into another zone. So if you had another room or even another facility, you can transport your signals between these facilities. And so even if you have 2K signals or HD signals right now, you could be future-proofed, depending on if you want to go to 4K in the future, or even something as simple as 1080p HDR signals. We have a pretty interesting control for this card. We have the ability to show the routing of the card in a graphical sense. So in this example, you see that both output 1 and 2 are routed to input B, and we have a dotted line going from input B to output 1 and 2. We change up the routing slightly, and the routing will follow dynamically in the graphical sense. So you can see at a glance kind of where you have the cross point routed towards. You can even route all inputs or one input to all outputs. And then finally, we're getting to our one-stop shop for broadcast compliance. So if a lot of you are in the broadcast space, this is a great card for adding on sub-channels or things of that nature. If you're an international person, there's some keywords on here that might not make as much sense. 21 CVAA, for example. In the United States, what that is it's a basically, we say that you have to have both video and audio health and safety data on at the same time. So if you're providing a crawl on the screen with some kind of emergency information, we're able to take that crawl or a text file of that crawl, and we're able to turn that into audio. So you could put that audio on a secondary audio channel and have that information for visually impaired people who are watching television. We also have the ability to level the audio. So if you have audio that's too loud or too soft, we'll normalize that audio. We can upmix from a stereo to surround sound. If you already have surround sound, we don't do the upmix on the two channels. We automatically determine your 5.1 audio and we pass your 5.1. So we'll handle those two situations dynamically. And then if you do have a secondary audio channel that you're using, we can take a down mix of your 5.1 or take your original stereo feed and provide that in their secondary audio channel, so you never have to worry about not having audio on a secondary audio channel. We can also do key and fill signals or logo identifications. So if you want to insert your graphic into your video, we handle that in this one card. We can also, with our EAS generator, emergency alert system, if you have something that will feed data from a serial port, we can take in that serial data and do a crawl on the lower third of the screen. So it's a very versatile card that allows you to do both branding and audio control in just one single card. So you can fit 10 of these in a single frame. So it's a very, very dense solution.